questions, use the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and I'll also send those notes out later. So thank you for that, Stevie. Okay, so here's a canvas that I pulled out, and it was quite loose. So what you want to do is you can get a spray bottle. Maybe if you're an acrylic painter, if you have a spray bottle, you just want to go and give it a nice spray on the back. And sometimes, you know, I'll just kind of rub the water around. And then you'll go, oh no, it looks even worse, because now you can see all these little bumps here. Now you can sit and, you know, try to spray down into that corner, but then it can end up even looking worse. And then you're going, oh no, this is getting worse. So one thing I use, you could use gesso, but then you've got kind of, your canvas is going to turn, you know, start looking white. And if you're selling your painting, you might be worried like, oh, I messed up the back of the canvas. So what I've come to use is this, I just use what I use for acrylic painting, this Liquitex gloss medium. And what's good about it is it dries clear, also kind of waterproofs the back of your canvas. So what you want to do is, I poured some out in this little jar, and I just get, you know, maybe a small brush. Let's see, just some, you want to get some on your brush, and you want to work it into the corner where that lump is. It will, and I kind of work it all around underneath. And what it does is it just gets that moisture to the canvas back there. And it also just kind of uses, I feel it just fills in some of this, it just uses up more of that canvas space, and it causes it just to shrink up. So you're going to do that. You're going to get it in all those corners, get that clear varnish in there. And then you're going to let it dry. And as it dries, these tighten up and get smaller and smaller. And then sometimes if it's still really loose, I'll just go and get some more of that liquid medium and just paint the whole back of it, because it really is going to take up all that extra flexibility in the canvas, is going to get kind of used up on the back, and then it's just going to pull that canvas tighter and tighter. So you'll notice they get a bit smaller. So and then you're going to leave it, let it dry. And then if you come back and it's still there, you just kind of do the same thing a few times. And eventually they get so small, they just go away. So that's what I do. It really works. See how much smaller they're getting as they dry. If you still see a spot, just go back in there. You might want to use an older brush because you kind of have to work it in there, but it just gets smaller and smaller because the canvas is just tightening up and it's still drying, but you can even feel it as you're going. It was so loose when I started. And as this dries, these will tighten right up. So that's my little tip. I have to do it myself when I'm painting, because canvases, you get them at all times of the year, and you know, basically you can't control all the variables. There's the wood, the cotton, and like I say, sometimes you buy them in the summer, they're going to be really tight, and then over the year they're going to loosen up. So that's just a little tip for you for today. So I've got out my colors. Got up some Quin red, white, black, Indian yellow, cad yellow light, orange, yellow ochre, sap, viridian. I've got some brown oxide, red oxide. And if you don't have these colors and you just have some, you know, burnt sienna at home, you can use that, but just dull it down with some of this ultramarine blue, and you'll get a less, you know, potent, you know, that reddy brown color from the burnt sienna can be really strong. So if you just dab in a little of that ultramarine blue, you'll kind of get more like one of these colors. You got cobalt blue, and then I put out a little bit of turquoise just for fun. So I am just going to start off with a little bit of a wash. Now today, because we're working with such a fair and, you know, light, you know, light color, I'm not going to put the wash over the way I normally do. So I'm going to use a little different. I'm going to use this Indian yellow here, and I'm just gonna kind of put in a little of that to start, kind of where the bird's gonna go. And then I'm gonna block in a little, so that's just a little Indian yellow, kind of a placeholder. And then I'll use a little ultramarine blue. And I meant to use the ultramarine blue and brown oxide just to kind of gray the background a little. Just get rid of that white canvas. And I do this just to, it helps to start getting those values in, especially with such a pale light bird. You don't want to have it on a white backdrop. You'll never be able to see those pale feathers on a light background. So you kind of got to get something in there. So I'm just kind of gonna go around there. And this is just that brown oxide and ultramarine blue. And I'm just gonna use that to gray the background. And I didn't gesso this canvas here. This is just a Blick canvas. Okay, so that's good enough. And I'm gonna put in, oh, and for all the acrylic painters watching, I did a little video on the acrylic for this one last night. So you'll get a chance to watch that too. And I'm gonna use a little bit of quinacridone red and some cobalt blue to make a nice purple color. And I'm gonna just kind of put in some purples into where I know that grass is gonna be, just to get some underpaint of purple in there. I like to play with color, so I know I've got this cute little yellow chick, so I kind of want to play with color and get some of this purple in the underpaint, because I'll be putting the greens over top later. So that was just a little of that quinacridone red and some cobalt blue. Get those pretty, really pretty tones of purple. If you have permanent rose and cobalt, you can do that too. And I'm wiping it off because it's, you know, part of the underpaint, and I'm going to be adding thicker paint on top. So, okay, so now I've got everything kind of blocked off. And you can kind of see how bright that yellow is. And I really like that. Let's make sure. My paint's drying quickly today. So, and the canvas absorbs a lot of the terp and the, you know, the wash I put on there. If I was using like a gesso board, this is a much slicker surface to paint on. So it also doesn't absorb all the liquid as much as the canvas. So you just gotta, I wipe off anyways, even though this is really a absorbing surface. But especially if you're using something like that, you want to wipe off the initial wash or it can get too slick. And I think that's more of a common problem. And we've got, now I want to just kind of get in some of the details on this little cute little bird's beak. So I've got my reference photo in front of me, and I'm going to be paying attention to the angles, like the way the nose comes down, and his kind of these edges are very angular. So I always look at that. And another thing I look at is where you can see the little feet. You can always line up something else like the eye to the foot, and you can kind of gauge your drawing that way. So I'm just going to start. First of all, I want to make sure I've got that little pose right. So there's the beak comes down like this. And there's that eye. Kind of has a little bit of a square head, and you can already see that real chicken head.
Krista?
Yeah?
Are you painting on an 8x8 canvas?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, this is the 8x8. And another real angle there. Kind of has a cute little back side where the, you can already see where it's going to have its feathers and everything. And then it's got this little leg kind of shape. And then it's going to come up. And it already has that kind of chicken nose, beak, I should say. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to look cute, whether you get it perfectly drawn in or not. And I'm not worried about these edges yet because I'm going to go and fluff that up at the end. So now that I've got this drawn in, I'm going to go and get some more color and get some more things painted in there first. So for the beak, I'm going to get some orange, and I'll use a little white for the lighter side, and maybe a little red oxide in there. Make kind of a nice warm orangey color. And I'm just putting it kind of on the top half of the beak. And then on the bottom half, I'm gonna just get some of that orange and some brown oxide and just keep it simple. Keep the top half light and the bottom half dark for now. And get a little bit of that. Oh, and I'm using number 2 flat right now. And this is a brush I got from Michael's. And it works. They work really well, these little brushes from Michael. So I'm just looking at the reference photo while I'm doing this and kind of getting in that darker under side of the beak. And then I'm going to go back and it kind of crosses over here. And then we'll get a little bit more white in there, a little bit of that orange, and just kind of get a little bit of that light. I like to, map out the face really at the beginning. It makes a lot of sense to me to make sure I get this right and then work further on. Okay, and then I'm gonna now just get some black, and I'm using that little brush, and I'm just gonna pop in that black for the eye. They have really cute little round eyes. And I'm trying to, pay attention to when I'm looking at the bird. Another thing I'm looking at is the distance between, the eye and the beak here. So those spaces, funnily enough, are easy to overlook, and then you end up with the eye really far back, or you have it too close. So you got to just kind of, make sure you're gauging the space as best you can between the eye and the beak there. Things I, realized later when I was painting these birds all the time is, oh, wow, it looked funny because later I realized the eye was, way too far back. So now for this shadow, I'm just gonna get a little bit of this brown oxide and a little bit of this yellow ochre and just get something kind of in here that's a little darker. And it kind of wraps around the eye. There. And get some of that cad yellow light. And a little bit of iridium. And some of that brown oxide. And maybe some yellow ochre there. And I'm going to just get in some of those some of those shadow colors. They look to me, they look a little bit yellowy green. And so let's get some of those in. Just adding a little more yellow ochre in there. Getting some of these underpaint, these darker marks in, because I'm gonna be adding, all those fluffy feathers later. And if you don't get those darker bits in first, then those feathers just won't show up later. So I'm just getting some of those shapes. If you squint down and look, you'll kind of see where there's some darker spots in all that fluff. You'll see some of the darker spots there. And I forgot to put his little feet in, so I'm just going to use some, we'll just use some red and brown oxide and just put something in there, a little mark to show that there's, you can't really see much from the reference photo, but just something in there to show those little feet. And now I'm going to switch brushes and I'm going to get a little more, I'm going to get some white and cad yellow light and mix up something for to get some of those lighter feathers in here. And I'm just kind of starting to add some of these, kind of this lighter shade to it. I'm going to go with a little, add some yellow ochre and some of that cad yellow light and get kind of an in-between tone here. And just kind of work that in there. And I'm looking at I always pay attention to the shape of these little, there's always this cute little cheek thing that they have with the darker feathers underneath, and kind of paying attention to this darker area here and in here and in here. And then I want to create a lot of fluff. So I'm just sort of kind of setting the groundwork for that. Just getting kind of this sort of warmer but brighter yellow. So I've got the cad yellow, some yellow ochre, and I'm just starting to get a little more of that color down there. But I'm leaving the underpaint showing through because if you look at the photo, there's quite a lot of bright colors coming through. Also, when you start adding this extra layer of color, you can start to see the overall shape and you're drawing a little better, and then you can adjust it. So I'm really applying the paint kind of a different way too. I'm just kind of dabbing it so that I have all that texture. But I'm not worried about these edges yet because we're not gonna rush to that yet. We want to get some paint down to start, and then we're gonna do that, but not right away. So that's a good start for a block in there. And I'm gonna now, what I want to do is go and get some of that background color in. So I'm going to get that cobalt blue, And you'll notice I put out 2 separate piles of white. So I have a white that I'm using with the yellows for the chick. And I put another pool of white out just that I know I'll have the blue in. That way it gives you just a better chance of not, mucking up the paint so much. So I'm just gonna get some of this down. And then I can continue to work on fluffing up those feathers. And I kind of went with a dark blue sky because then it would really pop out the yellow. And you'll notice the reference photo just has grass in the background, and I could have done that too, but I like having, some blue. And so even though, it just kind of isn't in the photo, I add that just for fun. And it's just trial and error, over the years I've practiced, doing things like that. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's too hard to do, but for me, it just gives sort of, then you got the land and you got the sky and you've got lots more going on than just all green. So there's really, when I find these reference photos, I think of what can I do, to add to my painting. They're the beginning for me, but they're not the full thing. I start to think of what else I could add. So, because some people ask, how do I get to the background, from the photograph? Like, what am I thinking? Well, I'm just thinking of kind of, what can I do to add more color and, more of a story to it. And sometimes you want to just keep the background simple, but I just like having the flowers and the blue sky with it. Just kind of, for me, it makes it fun. So I just use my imagination and I think of those things when I'm looking at all the reference photos, like what can I add? Sometimes you can take a picture and add snow to it. It doesn't have to be, the reference photo is just the, kind of the beginning. So I'm just blocking in this cobalt blue and white, nothing fancy, but I want to get it in because then I can get working on the fluff. And this is just cobalt blue for now and white, just real simple. I also try to think of things that I can teach that, in an hour and a half you can follow along with and learn something. And you can learn how to paint backgrounds too. Just if you don't think of this as a sky, but a background in a still life or something, you'll be able to transfer what you know and techniques onto other paintings. So just kind of blocking in here. And sometimes you'll see the odd bit of paper towel from when you wiped off. Just, you can get like something like this palette knife and you can just lift them off. There's a few little bits. You can get rid of them pretty easy. So I'm just getting it right up to the edge, but I'm careful to not mix the yellow in. And now this is your underpaint here for the grass. So you can kind of work that in there. And I'm thinking of it as grass, so I don't really know where the grass is going, but I'm just kind of working the background in as if there's grass there. And we can come back to that later. Okay, now I'm going to, I've got now the background done, and, well, not done, but blocked in. And I'm just going to look at my original I've got here in front of me. So the original painting, I've got the blue, and then there's bits of purple, and then the grass there. So I might block in a bit of that, a little bit of that grass around there too, just to get some of that in there. So I'll go get some sap green, a little bit of that red oxide. And I'm going to start off with some darker greens like this. And this is, and I've added some terp to my mix here just so it goes on nice and easy. And I'm just going to get a brush stroke up there into that blue and go get more paint on my brush. And then down here, I always start with the darker greens and then move up to the lighter greens. So this is just some sap. And just going to add some fun texture to the painting. And I'm leaving these purple bits underneath that are kind of fun. And we're just blocking in. Nothing too exciting, you know, you're just getting in the next layer of color. And then you're gonna have something fun to work with later. Just adds a lot of fun texture to the painting. And I just kind of use my paper towel to kind of loosen up that underpaint a little. And okay, so looking good. We've got all the background, everything's blocked in now. So you can kind of start getting to the more exciting stuff. So also it helps to see closer to what your background will be so that you can start to gauge your values a little more. So just because this is so dark down here, I'm just going to add a few lighter strokes there. I'm going to just add some sap and cad yellow light and get a few brighter greens in there because to me it's just so dark. And I just like to kind of cross some of them over and just get them kind of going different ways. And some of them I'll use the edge of my brush to create thinner strokes and some thicker. And I just like to add, there's some, different greens, like I'll add some Viridian in there and get a few of those real nice limey greens in there. And if your greens, you don't want them that green, just add a little bit of that red oxide in there and you can tone them down really quickly. And that green really looks good with the purple. So I've got it, it's just not as dark. I like that to work with. I kind of like to bring everything up in my painting. Just make sure now when you switch back to your yellows to get a clean paper towel, because it's easy to forget, and then you wipe your brush and you'll start getting mucky, yellows and stuff. So now I'm going to go and get some white and mix it into that puddle of cad yellow light. And I'm going to start, I kind of scoop the paint on the edge of my brush so that I get a thick amount of paint. And I'm just going to kind of start to dab some of that lighter paint. And I'm going to, when you work it into that background, just remember if you get some of it on your brush, just wipe your brush in between your brush strokes so that you don't get the blue in your into your bird. So certain surfaces you'll find this is canvas, so it's not as smooth, and so it doesn't do it as badly. I'm not having much of a trouble putting it on top, but if you have a smoother surface, it can really the blue and yellow can get really mixed together quick. So this one for some reason really is absorbing a lot today. So I'm just using the edge of this little brush and I'm really kind of creating the texture of the feathers. You can see it you can see it when I put it closer to the camera, those little blobs of paint. And I kind of like that 3-dimension that this paint gives. And so I'm just going to keep getting that fluff around there, and I really want to show off those little cheeks, so I kind of work that in there. And down here. And so I kind of scoop up a little bit of paint and then use it, and then I go back and kind of scoop up some more paint. I like to show off all the feathers, so this is the way I like to do it. And there's a real glow on the edge. The way the light's coming, it kind of really comes along the edge here. And yellows tend to be trickier for people to work with. So this is a good way to do it so you don't get overwhelmed with all the different shades of yellow. I used to try really hard to get all the exact colors in the chick, and then it just would look gray. It would look too gray. So I kind of stick to overblowing the yellow, because it looks almost white, So that would be really hard to get these super in between white and yellow colors. So I just kind of exaggerate it as being more a bright yellow. And so I kind of build up to that real white look. So I kind of start with all these yellows because underneath all those feathers, you really see a lot of color. They're not just white. You see a lot of that yellow in between. So I kind of just slowly work my way up there. Otherwise, it would just look like a big white snowball by the end of it. So I go with that real white near the edge where those feathers are, but I'm really careful not to lose the yellow. Otherwise, it just looks kind of gray by the end of it. So I'm adding a little bit more white to the edges here. And there's some here, it gets really white here. And then you can kind of really poof it up here. Making sure I have a lot of paint on the edge of that brush. And right up here, there's some longer, poofier ones, because I guess that's where they have a little bit of a wing forming there. And there's definitely lots going on here. And I want to get some real fluff here. That's what makes them look so cute. And I always put in a little speck of light in their eyes that makes them come alive. And I can never wait to the end to do that because I just love the way it looks. So I have to get them looking happy right away. So I'm just getting a little bit of this. I put a little tiny bit of that blue into this white mix here because I want to get around the eye here. There's some real, almost like a whitish, yellowy blue color. So I'm just putting that in there. And I'm just using the edge of my brush and getting some of that in there. And if you lose the shape of the eye a little, don't worry, because you can, you're going to be able to go in and touch it up with some black. I'm just kind of looking at the reference photo and I'm just tweaking that edge there. And I'm going to use some of the background color just to trim his fluff a little. There. And now I can go back in, and you can go back in and kind of shape the eye a little. There. And I want to, while I got it zoomed in, I'll just go back and put a little more highlight. Now, so it's amazing how much that background and having that contrast just, really gives your eye something more to look and see. So I can really see that my highlight kind of wasn't a highlight. It just disappeared. So I'm going to go get a little more white, and I added a little bit of quin red to it to make it more pink. And I'm going to just kind of get that color down there and blend it a little. So I put down that highlight color and then I'm just kind of blending it in. There. And I'm going to get a little bit of that quinacridone red and maybe just dull it down with a little brown. And I'm going to put some of that underneath here. Might need to add some orange to it to brighten it a little. And I want to just kind of get a little tiny bit of that red color in there. And then I'm just going to get some of this yellow ochre, little tiny dab of the green, a little bit of this red, and get a warm color for in here for that shadow that kind of goes down in between the leg there.
Krista, did you add orange or quin red to that mix that you just made?
In here, I think I added a little bit of that quinacridone red to it. Yeah, I just dabbed in there and mixed that up with some yellow ochre, little quin red, tiny bit of this green, just to kind of make a nice warm yellowy green shadow. And I'm just gonna kind of bring that around, kind of comes up there. And then I'm gonna get some orange and just kind of lighten up some orange and put in a little bit on the leg that kind of got lost in the mix there, but just to show there's some little feet in there. Just get that little bit of orange in there. Just a little something that it catches your eye and you can see that there's some feet mixed in the grass there. And I'm just gonna get a little more here. Just keep fluffing it up a little because and just kind of fluffing up that edge a bit. And now I'm just gonna go back to my grass area there. So I'm gonna switch back to this number 4 flat, and I like these silver Bristolin brushes. And I use those a lot, and these Michaels brushes, the Princeton Aspen brush. And Michaels sells out of them a lot. So you have to kind of get them if you see them and put them away. Now, in the original here, I had, I kind of also like to add flowers to everything. So I'm going to put in some of these little kind of wildflowers. And so to make that white for those, I use a little, you can use a little Viridian and a little brown oxide, kind of the lamb colors we used to make that off-white. So a little review here. We got the Viridian, little brown oxide and white, and you can add a little bit of yellow ochre to warm it up. So you get kind of a warm gray color. And just gonna go and put some of those flowers in. So I have one up here, just kind of, when I should put the centers in first. So I'm just going to use my little brush quickly and get a little bit of that transparent red oxide, and just going to kind of mark out where I had some of these. One was over here, here, and over here. Helps to get, kind of put where the centers are first, and then go in and add the petals. I jumped the gun a little, and I'm going to go and this little brush works well for the size of those petals. This is just a number 2. And just kind of dab in some, they're really just for fun, so I keep them really kind of abstract. I start out with this light, warm gray tone, so then later we can add the highlights to them, some nice white, shades of white. So I'm just gonna put that kind of warm gray down, and they're just kind of fun, really. I just kind of like to throw them in there. You want to make them a different color, you can. I like how the white doesn't really, it just kind of blends in with the picture. And we got one over here. I added a little bit of that terp to it just because the canvas is a little rougher, so it's harder for me to get the brush strokes on there. And then I want to get the white and get a little bit of that orange mix in there. And you can add a few highlights to some of them. And I had one kind of going off the edge here. And then kind of one over here. So they're just kind of fun. And then in the center, you can get some of this light green and, add a little bit of that in there. I sort of leave a little bit of the brown so you can see the shape a bit. And then you can get a little bit of orange and put some, I just put a little bit, tiny bit of orange sometimes, or something else in there just so it's not plain. And now I'm gonna switch and get some lighter, kind of more yellowy greens in there. So I have this mix that I had earlier. I'm just gonna add a little more yellow to it and get some of those lighter tones in the grass. Just kind of pop out some, maybe add a little of that yellow ochre so you get some of those different shades of grass in there. Also, I like adding a little bit of that yellow, more yellow into it, just kind of ties in with our little chick here. Kind of gets that color going around. So I'm going to get sap, and that cad yellow light really makes nice green. A little bit of, I'm going to add a little bit of turp in there just to get it to kind of flow. My canvas is really absorbing. It's one of those ones that today where it kind of absorbs the paint so much it doesn't move. And mix it up a little, get a bit more sap, and you can work in a few darker brush strokes here and there. And just keep kind of going, and then I'm going to go and get some of that cobalt blue and a little bit of that sap, and you can mix up sort of a few kind of more bluey greens in there. Kind of ties in with the sky a little. So add a little white, so some cobalt, white, sap green in that pool, and I'll get a few strokes of grass that are a little more on the more colder blue side. And I might just drag one or two across our chick here just to kind of really get her in there. And now we've got all this texture going on here, but we don't have a lot of texture in the sky. So I'm gonna go to that next, but first of all, I want to get a few lighter purples in. So I'm gonna go and get some of that quinacridone red and some of that cobalt blue and mix up something little lighter, kind of purpley color for in the grass color here. If it's too light, just add more cobalt and more quinacridone red, so you get sort of a darker purple. But I kind of like to add a bit of that in there. And I forgot, we just got to put a little bit of a impression of a little stem there. There. And okay, now I'm gonna go to the background and I want to get it a little more going on in there. So I'll get a clean brush and I'm gonna go to my kind of my blue pile of white and get some of this turquoise. And I want to get some, I think the turquoise really works well with the chicks. So I'm going to just start off maybe getting a little turquoise and cobalt blue. So you kind of have a little bit of a cobalt blue turquoise shade, and then you've got some lighter turquoise. And I'm going to just sort of, add some texture. So I'm using this number 6 bright from the Princeton, but you can use a flat. I just go for the square edge, and I'm going to make some kind of just some kind of square shapes here and there in the background, just for fun. We can soften them off later, but you kind of lay them down like that, and then you can go get some more cobalt blue and add a few different values of it. And now you're starting to get some of that same feeling you got when you see all this going on in the grass, and now it starts to tie in with the whole background, because it's getting kind of lively all around, not just in the grass and on the bird. There's so much texture on the bird too. So you're just kind of putting them down, and then you can put a few of these lighter, I'm even going to put a few of those lighter spots in here, just because it just has a nice flow when it's all around. So kind of what you do to one area, you're going to spread it a little. And if you want to blend some of them, you can dry your brush off, and then you can soften them into your background a little. Just use a brush that you wipe dry, and you can kind of blend some of them in. And it's really just for fun, you could do this on a still life background or wherever you want to liven something up. But it really makes sense here because there's texture going on everywhere. If this was really smooth, then you wouldn't want to have a whole pile of texture going on up in the sky. So it's kind of relative to your painting. And now that we've gone and created a confetti of blues, I'm going to go and add a bit of some more colors and a little more liveliness to the grass. So I'm going to go and get this little brush, and I want to get some of this orange, and I'll mix it together with this yellow ochre to kind of get a little dollar orange. And I'm going to just add some orange to the grass here and there. And I kind of go along the edge of one of the grass pieces. I'll just zoom in so you can see. So I'll just kind of take, a little bit of that paint and go along the edge of a few pieces of the grass there. It just it adds a lot to the warming the grass up a little here and there. And you just kind of go with your gut instinct. If you put a stroke down that you don't like, you can always, wipe it off and put a green, something green over it. But I kind of tend to do these more wilder looser kind of backgrounds. And mostly I like playing with all the different colors, so that's what got me into it. So I'm gonna now, we'll try putting a few hints of this orange up into the background here. You can be bold and get the same brush you made those blue strokes with, and you can clean it up. Just make sure your brush is clean and get some of that orange. And you can go for a few bravery strokes here and, put a few of these oranges up in here. And I like the square shapes because they they're, I don't know, they just look kind of neat. So that's why I like those square edge, brushes. And I might take some of that purple and work that in there. Work some more of that purple around. And I'm going to get some more of that cad yellow light, and has a little green in there. And I'm just going to kind of lighten a few of these grass strokes a bit. Get a little something there to make some of them stand out some more. It's amazing how they looked bright, but then when I went and put more bright into the background, they went and looked dark again. So you kind of have to, go back and forth a little. And I want to get a little of that yellow ochre and yellow, and you can put in some of this kind of yellow ochre and cad yellow light, and just put a few streaks of this yellow in there. I mean, there's always some dead grass in there, so just kind of adds a little more color to the grass, and it kind of also works well with the chick color. So I'm just adding a bit of that yellow into the grass. Now I just want to go back now and look at my chick. And I'm going to get in a little more detail around the eye there. So I'm just going to go back to my original reference photo and make sure that I can get a little more of the details here around. I kind of lost it with when I got into putting all that thick paint. Sometimes you can, scrap some of the original plans. So I'm just going to get some yellow ochre, and I just want to go in and make sure that some of those little spots that are part of that kind of the structure and design of its little face come back, because I kind of lost some of them. So I'm just using a bit of that yellow ochre here, and I'm just going to blend that into the paint. and work that around. In there. Remember that little cheek. I always love those little cheeks on these birds. And kind of comes in here, and this is a little bit smoother, and just fix up that background there. Kind of was still showing my underpaint drawing there. And kind of tweak the fluff a little too. So I'm going to get some of that white and cad yellow light here and get some more of that shape here that I see. Kind of comes down, and there's a little bit of the beak comes up in between there. So you're just at the end, when things calm down, you can start to see more detail with the different shapes. So I'm going to work just around the beak there I'll zoom in a little so you can see. So there's that little bit of beak that goes up into that fur, and then I'm just I just had to kind of reshape that. I didn't even think about it in the beginning. And I'm getting some cad yellow light and white and making a real pale yellow. And just kind of dabbing because I don't want to lose I don't want to lose all of that underpaint. And I'm just going to dab some more fluff out there. And so that's how you kind of are and getting those final details. You're looking at the little shadows in between. Whereas in the beginning, I was kind of looking at these main shadows here. And near the end, you kind of look at the little tiny detail shadows. And I'm just going to add a little more. Now I've kept these yellows really simple so that it's really easier to follow for your first time painting a chick, or because it can get too complicated. Yellows can get too complicated. So I really try to simplify them down. I didn't do any mixes with blue or anything too tricky. Mostly just the yellow and white for the light. But if you wanted to get a little bit of blues down in the shadow, we could try that. Just get a little cobalt blue, and you want to get that white and cad yellow. Now my white's getting a little bit of everything in it, and then add some more cobalt so you get sort of a yellowy blue color. And, you know, you could add a few, just a few of those bluey yellows down here if you wanted to. So you can see that they're a lot cooler than the ones up here, which looked cool before, but now when you add a little blue to it, you know, you see there's a lot, they can go cooler. Yeah. So I'm just adding a little bit of that just so you can get an idea of how you could add some blue hues to your yellow so that you get that kind of, it's a light and it's still quite bright, so it blends in with the feathers, but you're getting that cool blue in the shadows kind of look. And you can use it in the fluff down here. And down there. I'll just zoom in so you can see that a bit. So I added some of those bluey greens just at the bottom there. And they blend in, so you can't, they don't, you know, dominate. You could put a couple bluey greens up in here too. But I didn't want to do it too much because the whole thing can start to look a little washed out. You know, it can start to look washed out really quick. We want our chick to look happy. And I'm just gonna go in and kind of adjust the beak a little down. And just getting some more of that cad yellow light. And it has a little bit of yellow ochre to get some of that, just to kind of fill in some of that shadow there. Just kind of softening up those edges there. And I might get some of that turquoise and just kind of put a few more hits of that in the grass. You want to be careful not to go overboard with the cooler colors in the grass because it can get really too cool too quick. And I'm just using some of that yellow ochre mix there, and I'm just gonna get some more of that shape in there in the neck. And now his eye looks a little sad, so I'm going to fix the eye right now. Looks like he's having a rough day. Gotta kind of, the angle's a little lot more. There. That's better. And I just noticed this flower is kind of blending in too much into that chick's fur. So you got to make sure you can see that it's actually in front of him. And I'm just going to get a little more fluff on his or her little shoulder here. And there's a lot more here too. I think that's the whole part of about this painting that I love is, you know, you got to show that the fluff off. And that's just some white and cad yellow light. And there's a bunch this way too. It's kind of harder on this canvas to get the, so you got to really get your, maybe get some terp in there and get your brush loaded up and then just use the edge. And if you get too much, say you wanted to take some away, you just get your background color and get some of that cobalt blue and white mix again, and you can cut in some of that, but just make sure between you wipe your brush really well. Well, now what I'm going to do is look at it all over, make sure you're happy with all the lines. Still think it needs more little fluffies here. And just gonna make sure underneath the eye I get that little eyelid. In there. That's just some of that white and cad yellow light, and I think there was a little tiny bit of that cobalt blue for around the eye. So it's kind of a yellowy gray. But I really like getting that little eyelid in there. And I always use the edge of like this flat number 2. I just use something like that I can get in there with just the edge of my brush to make the line. So I'm not having to draw steady around. I'm just using that edge. And then you get that nice kind of little eyelid. which I think adds a lot of personality to the bird. You want to be careful not to go too overboard because then you start to lose your shadows. And then I have kind of a little blue highlight in there, but I think I'll add a little tiny spark of white in there. And that just kind of takes it up a notch. And okay, so I think that is about it. I hope that you have fun painting your little chick. I'm going to switch cameras and then you can ask me any questions you might have. And